So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Addison. I'm curator of North American and European folk art at the Museum of International Folk Art here in Santa Fe. I want to welcome you all today, and we also wish at the museum to acknowledge that the museum sits on unceded ancestral Tewa land, specifically Ogapoge, now present-day Santa Fe. So today, we are pleased to have America Meredith join us for a talk. What we're going to do is America is going to speak on the topic of the COVID-19 pandemic from an Indigenous perspective. Her talk today is titled Masked Heroes, Native American Historic Resilience in the Face of the Pandemic. Time permitting, I might provide some additional context. Her talk today is in conjunction with an exhibition that we have on view right now at the museum that is called Mask: Creative Responses to the Global Pandemic, for which America contributed an essay and curated a selection of Native American made masks for us. Please, as I'm sure many of you are accustomed to now, add any questions as you think of them in the chat, and we will do the Q&A after America speaks. But be sure to put them in the chat so that you don't forget them. And without further ado, let me now introduce America Meredith. America is the publishing editor of First American Art Magazine, as well as an art writer, visual artist, and independent curator whose curatorial practice spans nearly 3 decades. She earned her MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and taught Native American art history at the Institute of American Indian Arts, at the Santa Fe Community College, and Cherokee Humanities course. In 2018, she was named Sequoia Fellow by Northeastern State University. And for those of you who are joining us from Santa Fe, you may remember her from her days in Santa Fe, living here from 2009 to 2016, where she ran Ahalenia Studios, an alternative art space in Santa Fe. America is enrolled in the Cherokee Nation and is based in Norman, Oklahoma. So please welcome America.
Hi, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Leslie, for this wonderful opportunity. And yeah, when we were first discussing it, it seemed like masks were like, in the past and we're moving on. And unfortunately, that's not the reality now. Like, we have to mask up again. And, so this is interesting to go back and reflect kind of what the, kind of what we were going through at the beginning of last year, March, when things got really real. So I'll turn on my PowerPoint. I no longer see the chat. But I just want to say I'm coming to you from Norman, Oklahoma. I actually do like land acknowledgements. I know people in universities and museums and people that regularly go to conferences are probably over inundated with them. But here in Oklahoma, they're really fun because all the tribes have like pushed each other out of our respective lands. But this is the ancestral homeland of the Wichita and affiliated tribes, which are at least 7 different tribes in one. And then through most of the 19th century, this middle stretch of Oklahoma was belonged to the Muskogee and Seminole nations and was subsequently taken away from them. So growing up, and I don't know if you guys grew up around imagery like this, but it's like, I think one thing from the Native perspective is you have a really long view, like a long memory of history. And, I remember seeing images like this when I was a child. My parents would have like, copies of codices from Mesoamerica, and you would see the images of, people dying of smallpox, and then the winter count. So on the left, this is Mesoamerican, and you can see the difference in the years 1585. And then from the Batiste Good winter count, Lakota winter count, in this the late 1700s. And they're saying like on the Great Plains in the 18th century, like about every 6 years, there'd be a different disease going through. And this is just wave after wave after wave after wave. And I know like in Inuit communities up north, tuberculosis was really horrible in the 1930s. So none of this is ancient history. This is like very recent, I think, on a lot of our minds. And if you haven't read this book, please, I think everyone should be required to read 1491. And it's by a non-native author, but he really makes an effort to try to encapsulate all these stories from the Americas, North and South, and kind of give you a basic picture of what civilizations were like beforehand. And then he's really clear. He really hammers the point home that what used to seem kind of controversial, that 90 to 95% of the population was killed very rapidly from diseases introduced from Europe and later Asia and Africa, um, you know, that these happen before the diseases travel more quickly than often the people, you know, because they go, you know, village to village to village. So a lot of native people and tribes were snuffed out before they even had contact with European, you know, direct contact with Europeans. So kind of understanding that everyone that was here is already, you know, there's a lot of discussion that we've already had our apocalypse. We are post-apocalyptic society. So it's like, I think that memory that we have been through so much worse than, you know, on one hand it'd be depressing. On the other hand, it's like, well, our ancestors got through this. We can get through this current struggle, you know, we can carry on. And this isn't to belittle any of the hardships or sorrows that have happened the last year and a half. They've been pretty horrific. And just to give you a little context from Cherokee, so everyone says they're Cherokee, a few people are Cherokee, and then there's this core culture, and it's a really strong core of speakers and, you know, dancers. So we still do, Eastern and Western Cherokees have the booger dance, and this kind of came out in the 1800s when there was a great deal of European encroachment on our lands, and they carried diseases. So a booger is a disease-carrying spirit, and these masks, and I think we're all adults here. I'm gonna go into some kind of unpleasant territory. These masks represent often European American or African people, or people from other tribes, and sometimes animals. And you'll notice they're very phallic. So this is about diseases coming into Cherokee society, but it's also, there's a belief that this is a way for the community to heal after sexual assaults by outsiders. So it's not an accident that these gourds are very phallic, these noses. So these Cherokee men would put on these masks and they dance around, and you know, the women would kind of they'd act really inappropriately, like very lewd and, you know, just kind of outside of what is socially acceptable. And the women would be able to kind of retaliate, you know, kind of drive them away. So they think that this is a way of healing from sexual assault, but it's also just the introduction of diseases. And you know, I read accounts in the 1700s where some of our medicine men would just commit suicide because they didn't have the ability to cure these diseases, like especially smallpox, but so many other that were coming in. It was so heartbreaking that medicine people would immolate themselves because it was just too much, and they felt so ill-equipped to be able to confront these new diseases. So it was March, and I'm sure you all went through the same thing where, you know, suddenly it's like, this is real, we have to go on lockdown. And, you know, the artists depend so much. Many of the artists don't depend on galleries or museums. A lot of artists depend on art fairs, you know, one-on-one, you know. And Indian country, unfortunately, we've all kind of subsisted on the internet, but Indian country has terrible connectivity. The access to internet is abysmal in a lot of reservations, and there's a lot of efforts going through even on the federal level to address that situation. So at First American Art, we have this network where we're scattered kind of all over Canada, all over the United States. We have people in Mexico, people in England. So we do have this network online, so we're kind of perfectly positioned for this time period of lockdown because we're already at home working on computers. So it was quick brainstorming, like, okay, what can we do for these artists? Because this in March, you can remember when everything started getting canceled, just dominoes, and we suddenly realized this wasn't going to be 1 week, 2 week, like this was going to last. We didn't think it would linger this long, but so something immediately that I thought we could do is, and it's obvious, it's complete obvious idea, is to celebrate mass and artistry of mass. and native artistry of mass. And it's very obvious to do a virtual show, but we just moved really quickly. So we put out the call for art April 10th. And then you can see we're like, okay, the deadline's April 21st. So it is like quick turnaround because people are stuck at home panicking. And then we actually did have to, I thought maybe we get 20 people. That's why we did offer a cash award. But we ended up having, I believe, 125 entries. So we had to delay that by a couple of days. And I had never done a virtual art show before. So I was just like, well, it needs to be done. So leaping in, and luckily I think it was fairly successful. And I just want to say, I hate the fact that masks have become were politicized last year. It was really grievous. Those two masks, Heather Otton made those for me. So that's my dear friend. And she's this amazing curator, intellectual writer, but she also has sewing skills. And I think everyone was just like, oh my gosh, we're facing this crisis. What can we do? So she hopped on our sewing machine, and the fact that she gave those to me is like such a precious gift. So I still have masks I have from other Native artists. And I'm going to definitely keep these as long as I can, because instead of being a symbol of repression or anything, it's a symbol of like, wow, we're reaching out to each other and trying to look out for each other and protect each other. So to me, they're a really positive image. So this is all online indefinitely. 73 artists. So I had no expectation that it would be this high. This spread really quickly, and it was great because, we've kind of seen with a year and a half now, kind of the positive things about doing things virtually, which you can flatten geographical areas and you can just, immediately talk to someone across the globe. So you can tell that through social media, this traveled to Alaska. We got a lot of Alaska Native artists entering, and then a lot of Canadian artists, which was great. I'm always happy when I can be confronted with a lot of Native artists I've never heard of in my life. So we had more than 125 entries. Some photos had multiple, and I did put every single photo online because I wanted to just celebrate the fact that the artists, that they rose to the occasion. We didn't want to vet. And I was like, oh no, they could just take an image. You never want to think someone's cheating, but if any of you have been teachers, you kind of have to think like, oh, how do we safeguard against that? So a way to safeguard was, so you didn't just take someone's photo from the internet, is you had to show the front of the mask, but you also had to show the back of the mask. And it seemed like that went well. It seemed like that worked. Limit to 4 entries. And we did offer small, really modest cash prizes because we're not cash rich, but and then Heather donated all the prize money for the first place. I don't know. I think she wanted to be anonymous, but I want to give her a shout out. And we offered them advertising in our magazine and online. And then we had so many people, we had to expand how many prizes. So we had Judge's Choice, where all the judges got to select someone, and then they got, a free subscription to the magazine. So these are very modest, but there was critique online where people like, this is when things were really blowing up badly in the Navajo Nation. They're blowing up here in Oklahoma really badly too. Some of the tribes have been really, really hit hard, like brutally hard by this experience. So there was a critique. It's like, oh my God, people are dying and you're offering cash prizes and contests. And it's like, okay, so this, that really stung. But my dad drilled it into my head. If you stand up and do anything, people are going to critique it. But it did sting because it's like, we're definitely not making light of any of the hardship or suffering, at all. It's like, this isn't like, yay, it is trying to just try to find hope or light in a really dark situation. And I think the mask really did that for me. So one of the statements I made is that this crisis is a time of sorrow and fear. Within this darkness is light, the generosity of artists turning their skills towards mask making for their friends and family, but also for healthcare workers and other essential workers on the front lines. So this is our way of shining a mirror on this light. Art is social, but since we can't throw a reception or gathering right now, we can host an online art exhibition to show fans' appreciation for this artist. Wearing masks in public isn't a social norm yet, but has to become one immediately so we can protect those around us when we get out. By showcasing the beauty of these masks, we can see them as symbols of hope and love and our desire to protect those we encounter, whether friend or stranger. Yeah, so we're confronted, and I don't know if you guys are curators and you've dealt with large mass shows. I'm really good at tumbleweed curating, where like you get more and more artists running in. And I know a lot of people like to divide artwork by themes. So someone years ago told me, always let the artwork dictate, you know, the themes. Like, so it's kind of amazing that they did really beautifully fall into the themes of abstraction and then four-legged, you know, like here's horses. From the water, so some people use seashells and water creatures. And then plant world, which, you know, ethnobotany is really important to a lot of us. So plants are often associated with medicine. And then two-legged, so those are kind of human concerns. And then winged beings. So it's kind of beautiful that everything fell into those 6 discrete categories. I was really impressed. And I did want to, I was hoping, I did not want to sell. We did not sell the mass at all. Like, that's not what we're in business for. But I definitely wanted to promote the artists, the people that are, you know, that art is their income. So a lot of people did have to turn to making masks to like make money. So they did that via Instagram. So in the desire to protect artists' social, privacy, I did not reveal anyone's emails. So for, months, like people would email me and then I would forward their email to the artist and the artist could decide if they wanted to write that person back or not. But we did share their social media and their public information. And I feel like that was a good compromise. And then, yeah, and then we listed every single artist by name. So it's like, just wanted to give them a shout out no matter what. So we did, and I didn't want to, I wanted it to be for all the people. I didn't want to, just showcase the hierarchy, but the winners, we actually had to have a second voting. That's why it took longer. It took a couple extra days because we had to vote twice, but because we had ties, because the art was so good. We were just blown away by how incredible. And these were done right after lockdown was like kind of initiated. So Howard LaFortune, I forget where this went. Museums snatched up a lot of these, but and I'm not even familiar with I'm sorry, please forgive me, Sawout First Nation, but it's a Coast Salish First Nation from Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And he's a woodcarver, formline woodcarving. And this is not only an incredibly beautiful mask, but the photo is lovely. And this is his relative. Yeah, and he didn't have time to paint it, but it's just like so beautiful. It's incredible how artists can immediately adapt their customary art forms to a new form. And this is raised beadwork from Hodoshony, other side of Canada now. In the east, the Iroquois kind of invented this raised 3-dimensional beadwork. So here she is adopting on velvet base. So this artwork emerged after the fur trade in the early 1800s. Once the fur trade collapsed, then artists had to turn to beadwork and selling kind of trinkets near Niagara Falls and different tourist areas as a way to survive. So art has been survival for a long time for Native people. And Leith Makawa, Anita, I never heard of her before, but we were just blown away. And we had other beautiful beadwork, but hers was just so elegant in its simplicity. And you can see the beads at her chin. You can see how it's moving away from the surface. So this isn't a flat surface at all. It's very sculpted. And then Bill Mendoza, so you have Great Plains, and he's using dentelia, which actually is from Vancouver Island, and then quill work, porcupine quill work. So porcupine quill work, some tribes don't do it anymore. Arapaho tribes no longer do porcupine quill work because they've lost the ceremonies that accompany it. But this quill work was, for many cultures, it was given to them by the specific immortal known as whirlwind woman. So it comes from this immortal gift to the people. And there are porcupines in Europe, there's porcupines in Africa, but no one else. This is completely an art form unique to North America. So to see it adapted to this mass form is really incredible. And then I don't know, Laura, if you want to talk about this, because this is part of the Folk Art Museum's exhibit.
Sure, I can talk about it. So this is a mask by Anita Fields, who incidentally just was awarded a National Heritage Fellowship. I see that I'm there I am. Hi. Yay. Okay. which is the highest honor for tradition bearers in this country. It's a program organized by the National Endowment for the Arts. And she was one of the recipients this year. And so what America did for us, as I briefly mentioned, was we asked her to curate a selection of masks for a digital slideshow that is in the exhibition, our mask exhibition that's on view right now in our Gallery of Conscience. And Anita's is one of those masks that's in the slideshow. Now, of course, we were organizing this show at a moment when it was really unclear what was going to be virtual and what was going to be in person. And so what made the most sense was to have this as a digital component that could be online or that you could see in the gallery. Unfortunately, we weren't able to acquire this. The museum kind of early on, our textile curator, Carrie Hertz, had decided that the way in which she thought would be appropriate to represent this moment in time, the pandemic, was to collect masks, face masks. And so often traditions are a source of strength for communities. And so to represent that through masking seemed like a really appropriate thing to do. So we weren't able to, unfortunately, acquire Anita Fields, but we were able to acquire a piece by Lily Hope, a Chilkat mask, which I think we'll probably see later, possibly. It's similar to a mask that appeared on the cover of First American Art magazine last month, I think it was. A piece by Dolores Gull, which is beaded hide, and she's a First Nations artist. And we acquired a piece by the design company called Aconav, which is run by Lauren Aragon, who's from Acoma Pueblo, and it is transposing designs from traditional Acoma pottery into fabric design, textile design that is then made into masks. And these masks this is what he calls protective styling. And the masks were distributed to Native American communities as needed, and they're also for sale on his website still.
Thanks.
So did I cover what you wanted me to cover?
What? I'm sorry.
Did we cover what you wanted me to cover?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And, this is the main thing is ribbon work, which is a fascinating art form, which when the French had their revolution, you couldn't, wear all these crazy fancy colors. It was passé. That was associated with the the upper classes that were decadent. So they exported all these beautiful silk ribbons to North America, and the tribes on the East Coast created ribbon work. So you're using negative and positive space in this kind of a cut applique. It's really unbelievably intricate. So you'll see it on leggings and skirts. So I love that she completely adapted it to the mask. But we were admiring how she on the little strings hanging down. So those are actually finger woven or braided, and you can see she actually put small white glass seed beads onto the threads that she then braided. So there's a lot going on. And then she has that pill pocket there, the plastic pouch, and then she has it looks maybe like cedar or, juniper's a proper term, but it's like, plant medicines. And I know that other people have kind of tucked plant medicines into their masks, I've done that where I go to art shows and put a bunch of sassafras in a pocket just to feel safer and more protected. So yeah, that was very deliberate choices on her part. And then also it's got a sound component with the bells. So I love that that's one of the hallmarks you can think of when you're looking at native art. Ideally, every piece will be thought about, all the edges, all the details, especially when you're looking at beadwork, even the back will be thought about. It'll be deliberate. And then this is a little hard to see, but if you look in the right lower corner, there's the mask. So this is the entire dance regalia. I think it's a grass dance outfit. But Michelle Reed, Lactaflambeau, I should never try to speak French, Ojibwe. But this is completely integrated into powwow regalia, which is just, I love how versatile things are. And then you can see more beautiful ribbon work and designs. I love that people maintain their sense of humor. So Carolyn Cavan, Navajo, I was like, this is the greatest artist statement ever. The masks were created for a family whose love of spam is forever, much like its shelf life. But this is like really well sewn. I mean, there's a lot of detail in this, but I love how this family has total sense of humor. And then I'd never heard of her before, but I followed her afterward. But Shayai, I'm butchering her name. Does anyone know? Shayai Lucero? Laura Sullivan. She created Breath of Life. So she is actually a florist. So I love that she took her knowledge of working with plants and floral arrangements and adapted that into a mask. So she's got abalone, she's got turquoise, and she's got cedar, which for so many tribes, cedar is a powerful medicinal plant. You know, many tribes use sage, and then in the East, it's all cedar. And she's calling it juniper, which is the proper term. But anyway, so she's a florist and an ethnobotanist. So I just thought that was really a different take, really unusual. And then if you don't know Pilarguayo, she's definitely someone to follow. Her main source of income is she does costume design for TV shows and movies in Santa Fe. And she's like all of the pueblos. She's Oko, Wingate, Cochiti, and Kiwa. But yeah, she just has her own style. This is just gorgeous. And it is practical too, so. Basketry. So this is Carrie Hill, and previously wasn't familiar with her work. I've definitely started following her since. So she's Chill Baskets on Instagram, which is such a great name. But this is I can't believe she could do this so quickly. If you've worked with Black Ash Basketry, it is a really laborious process, but just really incredible. And, you know, love the artist statement too, braided with sweetgrass and love. And sweetgrass is another healing plant. It can drive out bad spirits. So from the interior of Alaska, moose hide. And so she's using, they use larger beads there. 11 is quite large, but yeah, and then the florals that they're known for. So, you know, during this time, she's like, the spring, everything new is budding, everything is new and fresh, just like my flowers. So it's like, and then her other piece was about her husband surviving cancer. So it really is like looking into like the face of this. It's hard to get in touch with how much fear and uncertainty was in that time period because there were so many unknowns. And to be able to draw something beautiful or something hopeful out of that, I think is just really incredible on top of the artist. And then this is from the Two-Legged. There are a lot of people that are dealing with the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And sometimes it almost seems like a cliche, the red hand. But I know this comes from a very sincere place. Linda Lou Metoxen, she lives up in Wisconsin. But you know, up north in Canada and the Northern Plains, a lot of the abductions of women and it's sexual slavery is basically what's happening with a lot of women and young boys too as well, are associated with the fracking up there and the main camps. This is unfortunate, but it's reality. So she has 3 incredibly beautiful daughters. So I can see how this strikes home. It's like something you worry about as a mother, you know, hoping that your daughters will always be safe and protected. So she's still remembering our sisters. And it has been a lot on social media. It's like a non-stop, you know, drumbeat of missing and murdered Indigenous women. But you know, the mainstream press hasn't really addressed this as a crisis it's been. And unfortunately, even last year, the numbers haven't gone down, they've gone up for missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I really appreciate this beautiful and elegant way of addressing the situation. So Laura, do you want to talk about this? And if you don't, that's fine.
Sure. So we acquired a piece just like this by Dolores. It's not this particular one shown. She, by the way, Dolores did a photo shoot with her daughter. Her daughter is a very talented photographer. Her name is Faith, and she took this this photograph. As I had mentioned, this is a hide mask with floral beadwork. And it was totally appropriate for us because of the direct reference that she was making to the plague doctor dress from the medieval period. So the plague doctor, they had these face masks that had this very pronounced nose or kind of snout where you would put these medicines, these plant medicines in them. So presumably to get rid of what they call the bad airs, so that the doctor would be protected from the plague. And so she tapped into this because she felt like it was a familiar form to her from her own culture. And so she made a mask that she actually calls a plague doctor mask. And we're really proud to have this in our collection now. And it is on view side by side with a plague doctor costume that we have from Venice Carnival. So it's not an actual one from the medieval time,
Good.
but it's actually it was made, I think it was in the 1990s, and it is for the Venice Carnival.
And the Italy's still remembering the Black Plague, and that was essentially, that was what, the 13th century, the 1200s, 1100s.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting that this is very cross-continental, intercontinental consciousness, you know, of like the echoes of, you know, what happened in Europe and how it came over to the United States. And so she has this awareness, and we did have a debate with judging, like, okay, we're judging the mask, not the photograph. So the photograph is glorious, like the entire display out in the snow. But I was like, okay, I'm only judging the mask. So the mask is also extremely glorious. And it's just like we saw with the Athabascan. This is a little further inland. Cree is woodland and prairie people, but it's still got that beautiful florals and then the hide. So I just thought it was an incredible mask. But the photograph's pretty fantastic too. And Laura, I don't know if you want to discuss this. Lily Hope made this, and she's gone on and made an entire series, and she's chilkat weaver, and that is one of the most complex textile practices in the entire world. It's the fact that she can do the curvilinear design, so you can see how that curls. That is no easy feat. And she's making all these yarns from scratch. In the old days, he used dog fur, but unfortunately the tall tan wool dog is extinct. But yeah, but she's using merino, so sheep fur, but then she has to hand process cedar. So yeah, Laura, I don't know if you want to shed any
Sure.
light on
What I'll
this.
just mention about Lily Hope is that the piece that we have in our collection now is a variant of the Chilkat protector, and it's called Pride Chilkat protector. So it is actually a celebration of indigenous Two-Spirit peoples. And so it has this sort of added layer of meaning. She has this really beautiful quote that she uses when she talks about her Chilkat protector mask series, which has gone on to really be a kind of a big public service campaign, encouraging people to wear masks. And what she says about this series is, Chilkat protector will serve as a record of this time. In the future, people will know we were here and we survived. We are still weaving. So I think that speaks both to ideas of survival and resilience, and also how the arts are critical to that. And that you referenced that as well, America.
Yeah, and I keep trying to look for, I'll punch in the, you know, I've read about the idea of historical resilience. So we all know historical trauma, and it's taken a while. It's taken genetic studies for, you know, the public to understand that this actually does pass generationally. But there is also this idea of historical resilience, where some of the communities that have gone through, you know, just as an individual can come back from horror and become more empathetic, you know, and, you know, so communities, that can happen on a community level too. So I think it's like the beauty, the sense of humor, these are all tools of survival. So I do love where she talks about, we've left the world more beautiful through our weavings and a joyful spirit. So I think this is really something integral about indigenous art. Whenever I make a generalization about indigenous art, people always tell me, you're wrong, but I'm gonna throw this out there anyway. Is like, we know that there's horrible things going on in the world, like keenly aware that there's horrific things going on in the world. But I think you have a personal responsibility as an artist to anything you create. Like if I'm making a sculpture or weaving, I'm responsible for that. That's what I'm manifesting into the world. So, so you'll find, I don't think it's denial. I don't think it's fantasy, where you want to create beauty, because that's your contribution to the world. So you don't want to add to the misery. You want to lift up. You want to give hope and beauty. And it's not beauty. Beauty isn't like frivolous. I don't think it's not like, oh, it's pretty, it's cute. You know, it's like, it's powerful that this is something we can strive for. So you'll see a lot of references cross-culturally, you know, Greenland down to Tierra del Fuego, and it's about harmony and beauty and just what's possible, basically. So yeah, I just want to throw that out. And then we did, moving away from this art show, we did, and at first I was like, I'm so sick of COVID. I don't want to think about COVID. I do listen to writers and advisors in the magazine. So all the time, like everyone overpowers my views. So I was like, I'm over COVID. And other people are like, no, we have to get this in writing. You know, we have archivists involved with the magazine. And it's like, we don't know what will last, you know, online. It could be very fugitive. So it's like, you need a print record. So we did get together and discuss and kind of fly into action about what are some of the things we want to remember from this time that people did. So these are internationally known artists. These are incredibly professional artists that are kind of lending their skills. They're like, okay, well, how can we help, you know? So Craig George painted on this beautiful pre-made mask, and I had to reject it from the art show because it was a mask show. So I'm like, no, you can't just buy a mask. Like the whole point of the show is making a mask. So I felt bad that I had rejected this because it's such a beautiful image. So we could put it in the magazine. And he is an incredible Navajo artist. And of course, the cover of the magazine too is Marlo Kutuni, who, if you don't know him, he's a textile artist. He's active on Instagram. Definitely recommend following him. He got COVID and it was really painful because it interfered with, you know, there's the brain fog you get. It interfered with his weaving, and thankfully he's recovered and he's able to weave again because he's a fantastic weaver. So Navajo Nation at certain points led the entire world in COVID cases. So that's why we really wanted to highlight the Navajo Nation. But Lee Francis is a cartoonist up in, he's Laguna up in Albuquerque, and he got his fellow comic artists. So this is Aragon Starr out of Tulsa. He mobilized his community, these native comic artists, to create these free posters that were just about sanitation and masks that anyone can, and they're still up online, but anyone can download these posters and print them, just to, you know, different ways to kind of reach communities in a way that, you know, that they can understand and appreciate. That's not preaching. It's not, you know, Big Brother telling you what to do. And then Will Wilson in Santa Fe. It's good that this is Santa Fe based conversation. You'll know a lot of these people. So he has family back on the Navajo Nation, and there's him down at the bottom. He's a photographer, but he happened to be at Santa Fe Community College, and he's like, well, we have this machinery. I can print and hand make these face shields. So his family, I think that's his sister-in-law or sister, but she's back on the reservation. They own a hardware store, so completely essential, you know, needed. So the combination of the facial mask and the, the facial mask and the facial shield and the mask, you know, better protected them. So, you know, again, it's people asking, what can I do and how can I help? So one of our artists here, Thop Loco Muskogee artist Johnny Daikon, he did an entire series where he kind of integrated. So he's Bacon school flat style. That's his way of painting, and he completely integrated this into the history of images of people, his elders, being able to fight and defeat COVID. Back on the East Coast in Quebec, you guys might know Carla Himlock. She's an amazing quill worker. So, you know, museum collections all over, and she and her community members got together, and they started sewing scrubs for hospital workers, you know, just so they would have you know, scrubs. So it's like people, you know, just thinking what skills they have and what they can loan them. I don't know how he does it, but Roy Boney does a sketch a day. He's full-blood Cherokee. There is such a thing. And he's leader of our Cherokee Nation language department. So he always uses Cherokee language in what he does. And he's integrating, you know, there's the Zoom meeting, which now we're on one right now, integrating it into kind of Cherokee cosmology and our tricksters and our cultural heroes. Jorge Garza, I'd never heard of before, but Stacy Goldar found him, and she wanted to profile him because he does these beautiful imagery just based on the codices, the Mesoamerican codices. So he was celebrating. So it's really interesting that a lot of Latin American people here in the United States, they may not be enrolled in a tribe per se, and they may not always know their tribal community, but they are of indigenous ancestry. So that's something we address and discuss a lot with First American Art Magazine. But he was really celebrating people that were, you know, putting their lives at stake. So grocery workers, it's really a mundane, underpaid job, but it's like, you know, it's something our society needs to function. And he had other ones about, you know, people that are the farm workers that are actually harvesting the food, that they're definitely putting themselves at risk too in this really beautiful way. And then, you know, everyone's stuck at home. So a lot of artists, throughout the country, like just started putting up free coloring books. And you know, children of course, you know, really suffered during this time period with schools, everything going online. It's like, you're a young kid, you're not made to sit at a computer all day. So this is kind of a gift that different artists gave children and adults to kind of reduce their stress, but you know, coloring pages. And then a lot of musicians couldn't perform concerts anymore, and that's still a struggle. So a lot of people collaborated using computers and released CDs and did online concerts. So I'm glad we could just reflect that all. We weren't able to include this in the magazine, but the virtual powwow, and you can see there's 250,000 people that have participated in the virtual social distance powwow. I supported them. I got a couple of social distance powwow shirts. But in the beginning, and here in Oklahoma, we didn't cancel powwows because our state is not well run at all. It's terrifying. But you know, for people that couldn't gather safely, it's like you could dance, you could sing, you could drum online, you could share your stories, you could have specials. And of course, it's not a substitute at all, but it's a way to build community and, you know, just know that, you know, you're not alone in what you're going through. And I think that's really been important. This has been a really incredible community. And earlier this year, we're still brainstorming, like, what can we do? How can we contribute? So, you know, and it is kind of an opportunity. So First American art is teeny weeny, and but there's something very equalizing about this humble Zoom platform, where you know, we realized that this was our moment that we could be equal to the Met or the Guggenheim, you know, because everyone's kind of using the same platform. So we put forward our symposium, which is, you know, not that any of us would ever consider ourselves experts, but how to write about indigenous art. And we're kind of shocked that we had 500 slots and they all filled up. Like, we're kind of shocked that there was that much interest. So every one of the talks are still online. They're available for free from, you know, you can watch them on YouTube whenever you want. So they're available for teachers who want to share these with students. And kind of rode that little high for a couple of weeks that it was so well received. And I really want to give a shout out. How are we for time? I'll wrap it up quickly so Laura can share more. But the Poe Cultural Center right north of Santa Fe, I hope you guys are all familiar with them, but they're out of Pewaukee Pueblo, and they have a beautiful campus. They have classes. And like I said, a lot of the tribes in this area in northern New Mexico and in Arizona do not have good internet access. So you could tell that they were just brainstorming, what can we possibly do for the artists? And a lot of people don't know how to make their own websites. So they created a native art marketplace. So now that we need masks again, this is one way you can find artists, native artists that might still be making masks for sale. So this is a Facebook group, and you can just go on there, like, who has masks available, and be able to support an artist that might be in a really extremely rural area. And this is some of the other things that the Poe Center did. They were like providing micro grants to artists, trainings, talking circles, just to talk, you know, just to get people connected. I'm just really in awe of them. I can't say enough good things about them. I'm trying to get through this without crying. Okay, SWIAP is what it is. That's enough said. So there's a need for many artists who have lost their income for the entire last year and a half. Like, this is how they're feeding their children and staying in a home. So a lot of people are really hurting financially, and art is survival for a lot of Native families. Not just in the Southwest, of course, but Pine Ridge, South Dakota, 80% of the families depend on arts for their income. And you don't think of Pine Ridge as being a major art center. So Poe saw the need. They have access to Powake Pueblo. They have access to Buffalo Thunder. So they're going to have a 3-day art market for the community, up to 500 artists. Everything has to be masked. They deeply care about safety. And yeah, so they offered their outside booths for free. This is absolutely just to support the artists. So I hope these are coming up in like, what, 2.5 short weeks, really soon. But I really hope those of you that are able to can come up and support this effort, Pathways. So that's my infomercial. So thank you so much. And yeah, should we turn it over to Laura?
Sure. I'm just going to briefly share some images from our exhibition, #Mask, Creative Responses to the Global Pandemic. Here's another one of those photographs of the Dolores Gull mask. You can actually get it from this angle, get it in profile. You can see better how it echoes the shape of a plague doctor mask.
Can I really interrupt you really quick?
Yes.
So yeah, so a lot of beadwork, this is a time period of missionization in the 1900s. A lot of beadwork is kind of underground. So it looks like pretty of flowers, but there's actually a lot of information encoded about ethnobotany in floral beadwork. So people have actually looked at like moccasins made by midwives, and that there's specific plants encoded. So it's kind of this underground, like hide from the missions information. So I just want to throw that out.
That's great. So are you able to identify?
Oh, no.
No. Okay. Okay. So for this exhibition, I mean, the mask was, so here's an installation view, and that screen that you're seeing at the end, that is the slideshow that America made the selections for. We've got a COVID piñata hanging from up there from an Albuquerque piñata maker. And then we've got this wall on the right side of different masks. You see the plague doctor costume from the Venice Carnival there on the left. And then closest to us on the left, you see an ofrenda, an altar piece done by Arthur Lopez, who is a Santa Fe based santero. And so the mask was, so pandemics are first and foremost a public health crisis, but at the same time, through this exhibition, we were trying to look at some of the social and cultural dimensions of a pandemic. And the vehicle to accomplish that was the mask, because the mask has become so symbolic of so many different things. So it's really become symbolic of a lot of the things that divide us as a society. So for example, in relation to race, class, or age, or other characteristics that have determined who is disproportionately impacted by the virus. It's shown us the political divide. The mask has come to represent one's political beliefs in a polarized moment in history. It represents rhetoric about masculinity and strength versus weakness, as well as contagion, toxicity, and nativism. And also questions surrounding science and truth. And so with this exhibition, what we hope to capture was not only how artists around the world have responded to a public health need through their creativity, but also the myriad ways in which the mask has become a metaphor for something that's larger than us. So here's that comparison between the Dolores Gull and the plague doctor. Here's that wall of masks, and the masks are from all over the world. And we will be adding to this incidentally. So we had to phase things in because we had limited access to the museum. And so it was pretty challenging to receive the pieces here at the museum. And it was much more challenging for artists to send them to us. We're still actually dealing with that with difficulty for artists to send us things from India, for example. So in January, we're going to be phasing in some additional masks and other materials that are coming from Latin America and India in particular.
You can see that Lily Hope mask on
Yes.
the bottom, third from the left.
Whoops. So this is the Akadav one by Lauren Aragon that I mentioned, transposing the pottery designs. Here's the Lily Hope that that America showed us. And then here's the one that she gifted to us. So you can see that this is the Pride Chill Cap Protector mask, and you can see the rainbow motif that she has made. Okay, well, I just want to thank you so much, America, for being part of our project and for doing this talk today. You're always a pleasure to work with, and you remain the artist who did my all-time favorite painting ever. What is it called? Bambi?
Oh, Bambi, yeah, I own that. Bambi makes some extra bucks modeling at the studio. Thank you for this opportunity, and I hope we all get to see each other at Native Art Week. And if I stay 6 feet away from you and have a mask on,
We will know why.
Because I want to see you in 2022 too.
Okay.
Bye,
Terrific, and
Heather.
thank you everybody for being here.